Christian here. I had accepted Christ at an early age. Always felt like a hypocrite because life at home was less than pleasant. Seemed like locking horns with my mom was a weekly occurrence. Anyway, I was 12 years old when this happened. We lived in an extremely small house and it was hot, humid summer day. Me and my mom had been arguing because I had asked earlier in the week for a picture of my grandmother. She passed right before I was born, and my mom locked away anything that reminded her of her mom. I did know my dad's family, as they lived in another state, and my mom was not a people person. She never allowed me to mingle with what few relatives I ever had. As a kid, everyone knew I had aunts, grandmas, grandpas, nieces, nephews. I had nada. So, anyway, I kept bugging my mother to produce a picture of my grandma, and she refused. So, one very hot day, I am in my bedroom in my house with one failing AC unit in the living room. I'm listening to records on my bed and begin to get really cold, starting to see my breath with this fog forms at the end of the bed. I'm thinking a fire? Fog? As clear as day, an elderly woman's face forms in the mist and she smiles at me. Her features were so distinct they may have lasted 10 to 15 seconds, then all starts to fade. My trusty 70s Polaroid was probably on the nightstand, but I was frozen, where I sat in complete awe of the situation. A few minutes later, my mom came into the room and asked me, "How in the world did this room get so cold?" It definitely was not because of the tired old AC unit. Later on, I told her what had happened, and she finally caved in and retrieved a picture of her mom from around the time she had passed. It was the face in the mist at the end of my bed. Most pastors I've spoken to about this say it had to be a demon, as there is no spirit Starbucks hangout when you die. You are either with the Lord or with Satan. If it was something malevolent, then why the one-time appearance? Anyway, thought I would share. I'm a 22-year-old French-Canadian female from Quebec City, and last year, I experienced something out of the ordinary. I was studying in Tahiti, French Polynesian, for about 3 months when I decided to take part in a 2-week field trip to New Caledonia, organized by my host university. Before joining the trip, I had little knowledge of New Caledonia and the culture of the people who lived there. Many of my Tahitian friends were somehow a little uncomfortable with staying on Kanaks land due to formal tribal rivalries and magic practice, but I didn't think much of it because, as I said, I knew little about the native culture at the time, and I just thought they were only anxious about leaving the island for the first time. The first week of the trip was amazing. We had so much fun discovering things during the day and partying at night. Then, for the second week, we left the capital to travel to the center of the island, where we would stay a couple days in the mountains and a nice camp. I shared a room with my colleague, Kat, from Quebec, who was part of the exchange program in Tahiti, like me, and entered the trip as well. One night, as our group was heading back to camp from the restaurant where we enjoyed a nice meal, I got blown away by the stars in the sky. I had never seen so many in my life. They were so shiny and sparkling. I stopped walking to look at them, and this is when I felt something weird on my left bare foot. It was a sensation I had never felt before, as if something was caressing my foot with a million little needles. Then, I felt a strong sting, followed by an intense rising pain on the top of my foot. I immediately let out a huge scream of pain, tears rushing to my eyes. It was so bad. My Tahitian friend Hal ran to me and carried me to the camp, where the light showed my foot was already swirling like crazy. My teachers ran to me, wondering what had happened, and when they saw my foot and what looked like a centipede bite, one of them started sucking the venom out of the womb. I couldn't stop crying. I was in so much pain, I was pissed that I didn't get to see the chance to see the thing that had bitten me. South Sea centipedes are poisonous, but they won't kill you. They just hurt like a mother. Another Tahitian friend of mine, Vi, came and poured a Chinese remedy on it, and I felt the pain dim down a little. There was nothing more we could do that night about this incident, so I went to sleep, hoping the day after I would be feeling better. Kat was already sleeping when I got to bed, and I managed to climb onto my bunked bed and fall asleep immediately. It wasn't long that I was awoken by an uneasy feeling. I opened my eyes and saw an imposing dark figure in the right corner of the room. It was standing in the dark just before the door. Fear invaded my body. I tried to scream to wake up Kat, but only a little squeaking noise from my part could be heard. I was totally aware of my surrendering and could see her sleeping in her bed, unaware of the situation. I couldn't move at all. I was paralyzed. My attention was turned towards those two red eyes that shone in the corner of the room. I couldn't see its face, but this thing, this creature, certainly was not human. I remember that its arms were so close that it could touch me without even having to move closer to my bed and leave the dark corner of the room. It kept caressing me with its long claws that hung at the end of its large fingers. I could feel the tears running down my cheeks and the panic that was confusing my mind. It caressed me like that, from head to toes for what seemed like an eternity. Then, as it was getting more violent with its touch and approaching furthermore my bed, my Tahitian friend Vi entered the room, unexpected. It vanished immediately, and I sort of woke up panicking. She was only checking on me and my foot. She gave me 2 Tylenol to dim down my fever and the pain. Of course, I tried to tell her that I saw a monster in the corner of my room, and of course she did not believe me and laughed it off, because, as she was saying, I was being delirious from the poisonous bite. But it felt so real. No need to say that I didn't sleep well that night. I have never seen this entity again, but I still think of it quite often, and I really wonder what this supernatural creature that I saw that night in New Caledonia. I never suffered from night terrors or sleep paralysis before, and this is why I keep thinking that I encountered a creepy entity that night, and for some reason, it is linked to this centipede bite. I have been doing some research on the signification of centipedes in the Kanak culture, as well as the Tahitian culture, but nothing matches the description of the events of that night. Since this encounter, I have been calling centipedes demon creatures, and to this day, I have never walked barefoot on grass again. Are ghosts real? That's a question that so many people have. Some are believers, and others are skeptical. Let me give you a story on why I'm a believer. I have always been able to see ghosts, even when I was a very young child. But back in 2009, I was about 14 years old, growing up in Little Havana, down in Miami. My mother was a constant churchgoer, but I haven't stepped foot in a church in over 5 years at this point. One Sunday night, my mother had invited me to go to church with her, and I decided to agree and go with her. 6 p.m. comes along, and we were all dressed and ready to go once we arrive. It feels as if all bad and negative energy was all left outside the door. Things are going great, and it was getting towards the end of the evening, and we all get down on our knees and pray. I close my eyes, and all of a sudden, it's as if I have left my body and started floating above everyone, including myself. I'm at a loss for words. All of a sudden, I see someone else floating, but this person had wings and a beautiful glow around them, just as if I was seeing my guardian angel. At this moment, I'm lost in thought, but felt at ease. I see this angel start to move over to where I'm kneeling, and starts to get in the same kneeling position, and he slowly starts to hover downward, and it looked as if this angel was going inside my body, but the only thing that looked was left out were the angel wings, and they now looked like they were attached to me. After that, I snapped back and my prayer is over. I got up and felt so great and peaceful. I've never felt better in my entire life. We arrive at home, and I decide to go to my room and watch some TV, and my room was pretty spacious and very long, so I lay down on my futon in front of my bed with a blanket and have the lights off and start watching George Lopez. Midnight comes along, and I was very relaxed and enjoying watching my show. A couple minutes later, after midnight, I start to feel that it's getting harder to breathe. The air started to feel very dense. I heard a thump on my bedroom door. I immediately looked over and saw nothing, so I turned back to the corner where my TV was at, and now I'm frightened and in total shock now. I'm seeing about 6 to 8 dark shadows walking in my room, itching closer and closer to me, and they just stare at me with very blank expressions. I was in too much shock and so frightened that I couldn't move from the spot I was sitting in, and I looked down to my blanket to try and not to look at them. But now, I start to see roaches crawling on me. I try and push them off as I'm yelling, "Get off me!" in tears at this point, because I didn't know what to do, but they just kept coming, and coming, and coming. I threw the blanket off me and got up. All of a sudden, I start getting this stench in the room. I can't exactly pinpoint what it smelled like, but the closest thing I can think of is the smell of burnt rats that have been left to rot for years. As soon as I get this horrible smell, I get this horrible feeling, and the hairs in the back of my neck start to stand, and I could feel somebody looking at me behind me as I was so petrified to want to turn around. I slowly turn towards where my bed is, and to this day, I still can't get the image out of my head. I saw this demonic-looking figure standing about 6 foot 9 inches tall, with the torso of a man who's heavily built, but the lower half looked like goat's feet. Its hands looked as though they were claws from a bear. Its face wasn't very hard to distinguish. It was dark in my room, and you could see this demonic shadow. Its eyes were blacker than the rest of its face, with sharp teeth, and it seemed to have horns on its head. I was frozen in fear, and this figure made such a horrible growl and started to reach with its claw for my head. I quickly ran back and turned on the light. Just like that, it was gone in a flash. I go to my mother in tears, explaining what I just saw. She wasn't sure if it was just my imagination and my mind playing tricks on me or what. I told her I screamed for her to come in and said no sounds had come from my room. The next day comes along, and I try to put it in my head that it was just my mind getting the better of me. So, come nighttime, I decided to go to sleep early because the previous night I was up most of the night anyway. I slept with my face to the wall. Around 10:30 p.m., I start to hear my door being opened and then closing. The weird part is, I maintained my room locked after what happened the previous night. I start to hear and feel footsteps getting closer to me, and closer to where I feel somebody looking over me, and I can feel breathing on my neck as my neck cringes tighter and tighter, as if somebody is choking me. I close my eyes, and when I do, I start to get a vision of this creepy figure on top of me, with a sinister smile on its face. I was so scared of what was going on. I was not able to move or open my eyes after that. It felt as if I was paralyzed from head to toe. I don't know how long someone or something was staring at me, but it felt like forever. Eventually, I feel it get off me, and footsteps start to move towards my bedroom door to leave. I hear the door open and then close. Once it closes, I feel like I can breathe again, and I'm able to move. My heart is racing, I'm sweating like no other, and decided to turn on the light. I didn't sleep at all that next night again. The next morning, I go to say good morning to my mother and ask if she happened to walk into my room or hear anything last night, and she replied with a simple and concerned no, and I told her what had happened. That same day, we decided to go back to church, and I talked to the priest and tell him of what I have seen and gone through the last few days, so he decided to do a prayer just for me. I still felt very edgy on everything, but hoped that the prayer would help. Come nighttime, I start watching TV in the dark, and I hear a noise behind me. I look over and this demonic creature is right behind me, a lot closer than before. It looked a lot angrier now, and more aggressive towards me. It lunged for me again, and I quickly jumped open my bedroom door and ran to my mother's room in terror. She quickly turns on her lights and tries to calm me down, but nothing was working. We decide to go to church again and tell the priest that it is still happening now. The church is more concerned, and they decided to do a type of ritual. Not exactly an exorcism, but something to try and get rid of the demonic spirit that keeps terrorizing me. They sit me down on a chair and pour some holy water on my hands and have me hold onto this bamboo stick of some sort, while everyone from the church builds a circle around me with 3 candles sat around. So, we commence, and they start walking in a circle, while the priest is saying a prayer, and others praying for me. I could feel anger start to build inside of me, to the point I wanted to yell at every one of them and beat everyone with a steel chair. I was sitting in it, including my own mother. I started to feel the pain of my life, the torture I have been through. I started to feel hell inside of me. My mind started envisioning everyone down on the ground, bloodied, and me over them with a huge grin on my face. I feel power. I felt total evil running through my veins. It almost felt like I wasn't in control of myself anymore. I felt my head spinning and spinning. I could almost feel my body getting lighter with every passing second. I felt like I was going to explode. Once it was over, I suddenly snapped back into reality, and everyone looked at me and started asking how I was feeling, and I just said very tired and drained. People started shaking my hand and hoping this would help, but many were still worried when they realized my hands were freezing cold, more than usual. It's Florida, and anyone who has lived here knows how humid it is here all the time, so to get much of a chill around here isn't often. But on this day, my hands felt as if they were on fire, but everyone else said my hands were cold. I decided to take the temperature of my hands real quick to figure out which it is, and to my surprise, my hands were actually 25 degrees below room temp, while the rest of my body was at a normal temp, which is around 98 degrees, so for my hands to be that freezing in a matter of minutes, it was very shocking. I was very quiet on the ride home and told my mother I was tired and wanted to go to bed, and she just said, "Okay, good night, I love you." So I head back to my room, feeling tired, had the TV on for some night in my room, and went to lay down for about 15 minutes later. I hear a growl and looked, and I saw this demonic creature again. At this point, I've had enough. I decided to stand up, turn off the TV, and have the room pitch black. I could see this creature, still as he is right in front of me. Now I grabbed my Bible and start yelling at it, saying, "I'm not afraid of you. You aren't nothing without my fear. I have God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit with me, and my guardian angel has been protecting me from the start, and now I'm ready to stand up. Go away, you don't belong here." I yelled. I finished by saying, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I now banish you." As I go to reach for the light, I hear one last powerful growl, and I can now feel my room feeling less heavy. I feel at peace. I stayed up all night thinking. Come morning, I go out to the kitchen to where my mother's cooking breakfast. I asked her if she had heard any commotion from my room or me yelling, and she said she couldn't hear a peep out of me or my room, and it was just total silence. I told her how I yelled a prayer at this demonic creature, which, to this day, I still believe I faced the devil and made him leave. I still continue to have paranormal experiences from time to time, but haven't seen this level of demonic activity. I decided to move across the country and move to Arizona, looking for a fresh start, leaving all of this paranormal stuff behind me. Things are going great until just recently, things have taken another turn for the worst. This is kind of a long one. A few years ago, my mom was sleeping downstairs, bad idea, and she had an encounter with something inhuman. I used to always get scared at night and knock on their door to sleep with, and one night, my mom heard a knock on her door, and she assumed it was me, so she says, "Come in." While still half asleep, she heard the door open and heard something quickly patter across the ground and jump on the bed, and it began whispering in her ear, mimicking her voice. She freaked out and opened her eyes, only to see a very skinny, small, webbed-looking creature running out of the room. Me and my dad awoke to her screaming. We believe the house was haunted because we all had weird experiences in the house. We believe it came to be that it was haunted because the previous owners were drug addicts who performed satanic rituals and other things. When I showed her the picture of that skinwalker picture that kind of went viral, she said they looked really similar, but we don't know if this was a skinwalker or a malevolent spirit. So about a year ago, me and some friends went to a cave by one of their houses. We were in there for about 20 minutes before we hit the back of the cave and nothing was happening. I started to look about the cave with my flashlight and saw a small crawl space and pointed it out. We went in and saw nothing, but the entire area was a smooth dirt-like. It was like it was man-made. When we left the crawl space, we decided to use a voice recorder to try and talk to ghosts. When we asked if we had heard anything, we'd heard nothing until we listened to the recording and heard a voice of like an old smoker, and it basically said, "Leave, go now." It completely disregarded our questions. We took its advice and we started to leave. We had a rock thrown at us, and I turned around and saw a tall, dark black shadow, about 8 feet tall, with dim red eyes. So I just wanted to write this to see what everyone thinks it was. I was sleeping the other night, and I remember waking up, or rather, so it seemed, yet it still felt like I was dreaming. I was lying in my bed and remember sitting up and seeing 3 figures standing in my room with a dim-lit blue light coming from somewhere that illuminated them. I don't remember what exactly they said, or rather, he said, 'cause the one in the middle was speaking directly to me. I remember his mouth opening in a very inhuman way, with the jaw extending further than it should be able to. Their mouth and eyes were black. I mean, not like solid black, but a smoky type of black. So, sort of gray, but you could still recognize teeth and such. I remember them saying something about them coming in a few days for something. I don't remember what it was exactly. I then remember passing back out and waking up. Actually waking up and seeing some dark form dart across the room and hover directly over my bed. My bed is in a corner, so it was sitting hovering between the wall and I, about 4-inch gap at the time. I then felt a very, very intense sense of dread and heaviness throughout my entire fiber and being, and remember feeling this for a few minutes while it was just sitting there, my back turned to it. Then, out of nowhere, a sense of euphoria, great peace had come over me. No longer did I fear or dread anything, but rather, I felt happy, at peace, loved. I don't know how else to describe it. I remember that the thing, whatever it was no longer there. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, in the sense of believing and following my own route when it comes to what happens after human death. I believe in a very unique form of reincarnation, in which the soul, essence, energy, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, travels until it finds a new place to call home, and it could span across the universe. That being said, I couldn't help but feel like there was an actual evil presence there with me in the room, and a guardian angel, or some other known source of good energy cast it out. I guess I'm just sharing this with my experience and seeing what others have to say about it, as I am entirely unsure as what had happened, and would love to be able to understand it further. I will say this though, whatever it was, it definitely has got me praying last night, and I haven't done that in years, as I seriously feared for my life, but my soul and being as well. This is a retelling of an experience or encounter a friend of mine had many years ago. First, let's give a little background to this. Years ago, when I was between 18 to 20 years old, I was in a little metal band with 4 others, and this incident happened to our bass player in his home, which was also where we would gather for practice. However, it in a way involved all of us. Again, this is his telling of the incident. Also, this was South Texas and in the December timeframe. It happened sometime late at night, according to him. It just started around midnight. He woke up randomly, just felt compelled to look out his window. He was sleeping on the living room couch that night. When he looked, he saw a shadow figure crossing his yard. He said it looked like it was moving quite erratically. His example was like how the doctor moved around in the remake of House on Haunted Hill. Thinking he was just tired and half awake, he thought nothing of it and assumed it was just one of his neighbors, because they were known to do that often, and he went back to sleep. Shortly after that, He woke up with this feeling like somebody holding him down and making it hard for him to breathe, which sure sounds like sleep paralysis to me. Except he claimed the whole time he could hear chanting and whispering all around him, and no one was in the room with him. It eventually stopped abruptly after a minute or two. He sat up confused, terrified, and got a drink of water and tried to go back to sleep, which happened again eventually. Shortly after that, it all happened again. Same feeling, same chanting and whispering. He always said he never knew or could understand exactly what was being chanted and whispered. Regardless, this episode ended and he once again was scared and confused. He chalked this up to maybe he had just had a bad dream and managed to go back to sleep. Then, it all happened again once more. He woke up like something was holding him down, making it hard to breathe. The chanting and whispering all around him again. Though this time, something new happened. He said he looked over next to him on the couch, and standing in front of the Christmas tree was a short, about 4 feet tall shadowy figure that appeared to be cackling at him, though it wasn't making any other noises. This went on for what he said felt like forever this time, and when it stopped, he said forget sleeping and went to his bedroom and played with his bass the rest of the night. Also, for the remainder of the night, coming from the direction of his sister's room, where he would hear 2 knocks every couple of minutes. He didn't go back to sleep until the next night due to this. When the band and I gathered the next day for practice, he told us what had happened, and of course we all laughed and said, "Yeah, right, you're full of it." Then he showed us that in his yard, he found what looked like footsteps tracked through his yard all the way to his front door. The steps were just that, footsteps, made from shoes, but no defining features to them. No imprint of the bottom of the shoe, just plain. Then, when he told around what time this started happening, that it was about 3 a.m. when the last attack happened, we all froze because of what we realized we were doing at night. Our singer woke up randomly and was praying. Our lead guitarist woke up and just could not go back to sleep, feeling like something was wrong and off. And I, for no reason, woke up, turned on my lamp, and just started reading the Bible. We all realized that all of us at the same time was experiencing the incident and had gotten up at 3 a.m. and either prayed, read a Bible, or felt a sense of dread. Our drummer wasn't there at the time, he told us, and he never said if he did anything that night as well. But the story still had him spooked. The story has stuck with me for many years and I still have no way of explaining it, but I figured you would all like to hear it. My buddy never had another experience like this again,